This is the beginning of our engine rebuild portion of this course. This is a totally new adventure, just trying to do it on camera. This is the engine we are working on. Okay, next let's look at tools for this job, which are plastic rod is actually a special tool. It was. All right, so this is the specialty ring compressor. I've got impact tools here. Not advised for the beginner, but this one, the 1/2 inch impact, boy, that's almost a must on getting the balancer bolt out, front crankshaft bolt. The small one for valve covers, intake manifolds, exhaust manifolds. They can get you in trouble, especially if you're putting on torques, if you have torque sockets that you're using, and sometimes they'll strip out, especially if you don't get them all the way in because they're all grunged up with grease and grip. So you got to be sure everything's clean and the socket goes on all the way. This is a wood rod, which helps to push the pistons out. Sharpie marker and some plastic bags to mark your bolts so you know where they came from. On this engine they have several of them assembled so that they don't fall out of the parts. We'll talk about that when we get there. That's very important. We all think we're pretty smart, but boy, believe it or not, in a couple of weeks you forget where they all went. It saved me a lot of time for some of my projects last several years. So very important to know where the parts came from. Little miniature pry bar. These two big wrenches are used for the cam, and of course all the various sockets. Ford is notorious for using oddball size stuff like 13 millimeter, 9 millimeter, instead of like the Asian people. You can do everything with 10, 12, 14, 17, and 19. You can take the whole car apart. Occasionally maybe a 22. Feeler gauge, check our valve clearance, which we've already been into. This, remember correctly, is for the head bolts, torques. This is actually a special tool. I don't remember the bolt. I believe it is. Forgot. Been a while. Torque wrench, beam tight, most accurate. We actually need an inch pound for some of these. Spark plug socket, 1/2 to 3/8 adapter. These are actually a special tool for the timing chain tensioner. And of course that's just a 3/8 extension, a 1/2 inch drive ratchet with a tool for the socket in there for turning the crankshaft. That's the socket for the front of the crankshaft balancer to get the balancer off. And 3/8 ratchet. So that covers the tools. This is actually used for rod installation. It's supposed to have threads on the end of it, and they're gone. This is a 9 millimeter, really oddball. I had a heck of a time finding 9 millimeter plastic rods. Almost nobody makes them. I need to get 10 millimeter and turn them down on a lathe. Haven't done that yet, but I had enough of these already made up and put the threads on them, and the threads were really oddball too. I think they were 9 millimeter by 0.75. And there's also a 0.10 and a 0.125 for 9 millimeter stuff. This is a stripped down engine. All the wiring harness is gone. Would have been quite challenging and good for students to learn how to disconnect all that stuff. That was taken from me, so we're not doing that. So what we have left is, and the place we need to start is right here. Spark plugs. We need to get the spark plug out. So that's going to be these bolts right here. I'm going to use 3/8 impact because it's faster, and we won't hurt anything there. I believe this is an oddball size, 8 millimeter. Yeah, 8 millimeter. Check our direction. Be sure it's going in the reverse direction. Some of these small bolts you can snap off with an air tool if you're going the wrong direction, so you got to figure that out. Look at the arrow on this one, it's going counterclockwise, that's the one we want. Then you got to figure out, is it supposed to be out or is it supposed to be in? That way it's clockwise. What I always do is I just look at which way it's rotating. So this one goes really fast. I wish I had it's got a speed control. There's what I want. There's a speed control on this one. Go a little bit slow. It's got a speed control for each side. So I want it real slow. It also cuts down on the torque. This comes right out. There we go. Bolt just came right out. These we want to tag and bag. These are, still got them in my hand. The engine has been run for quite a while. This engine has 141,000 miles on it. It may not have ever had the spark plugs out. That's quite common. I do that myself anymore. We used to change spark plugs every 10,000 miles a couple of centuries ago. So the trick is you need to twist this. These have already been apart, so that helps a lot. You need to twist it until you can feel it dragging, and once it breaks free, then you can pull it out. Now, sometimes the more you can twist and twist and twist, and it still won't break free, and you need to get a very long screwdriver to go down alongside of it. So what I'm talking about is, if it won't break loose, you can force this down alongside and go work your way all around, and it'll break loose. Now, invariably, it still may just break and come apart. The insides will come out. They're in there. Little spring. And another piece. And you can usually put them back together. No guarantee on that. That one's being challenging. Even though it's been apart, it's dry. If you make, like I'm doing here, a long steady pull, sometimes that ensures that you'll pull it apart. You can put pry bars in there too. It's really hard to pull hard enough to get it there. It finally popped. This one's still dragging. I'm getting stopped here. So I'm trying to twist. There we go. There, it went all the way around. Now it should come out. But it was still tight. This one, I can tell that it turns. You can feel when the rubber just is flexing on you. So there's our, these, it's a good idea to number these. I didn't bring anything to number these. But here's the reason you want to number them. Sometimes, on some engines, then I have run into this, they'll have one or two of these that are shorter than another for clearance on the firewall. In other words, you can see here the length of these. There. Fairly good, yeah. So what they do sometimes is they make these shorter. I ran into it on a VW Passat. The rear cylinders on the driver's side, only the very last one was shorter than the others by about that much. Just enough that it wouldn't make contact with the spark plug. I just put new spark plugs in, I finished, and the engine was missing. So me doing what I always did, I just took them all out and laid them out, boom, no problem. Put them back in, didn't pay any attention, didn't notice because it wasn't very much shorter. Then it had a miss in it. So I stopped and scratched some of my body parts and went, okay, well, it didn't miss when it came in, so that means I did something. Then I had to get on the internet and I discovered, oh yeah, they made that one shorter than all the rest of them. So number them. That'll keep you out of trouble. We're going to put our right on our bag here. Plugs. Yeah. Good luck on reading that, huh? Put our bolts in there. So then when we go back together, we'll know where those go. We're not going to number these because I already know they're all the same length on this one. Next, we need to put the valve cover off. There's a couple of ways. You could also just take the intake manifold off. We'll do it this way. We'll take the valve cover off. You're going to have to, I'm going to send you through identifying some of these parts. You'll need to know what some of these are. This is a crank or camshaft position sensor. This part back here, I really don't know what that is. It's got, don't know. It's got an electrical connector on it. You can't see it, so I won't point to that anymore. This one we can see, cam sensor. Important to know, sometimes that should be taken out ahead of time. Usually you're all right though. We'll leave it in there. Now, careful observation of things is important when you're taking things apart. A point of interest, we'll just look at a couple of them here. You can see from this view, this stud sticks up less than this one does. This one sets in a hole lower than the next one up. This one is actually higher. You can barely see that from the view that I've given you, and this one is the same height as that one, same amount sticking up. We look over here, that these are also very long, like this back one was. This back one. That one, right there. And there's one in the center. It's shorter, but we're seeing a top view. Now you can see this has got more threads on it than this one. Several things they can put on those. In this case, a lot of it is wiring harness. They don't really use the threads, but they can for other things to go in there. But this is where the wiring harness pieces, they just slide over the top and they support it all the way around. So it's very important to pay attention which ones go where. Very challenging on an engine different than this one. Most of these engines are made for robotics assembly. So all of these little studs do not come out of the valve cover. You can get them out. I had some students take them out. That's not what you want to do, because you want to keep all these unique links all these unique links. That's our 8 that we used on these. Doesn't work. We need smaller, and we need deep well. It's not in this toolkit that I got out. Okay, well, this is one of those where if I knew what I was doing, I wouldn't have all this trouble. Well, you see, the one I'm looking for is still on the 3/8 ratchet. This happens in the real world, but it's really much easier when I'm trying to do video and thinking at the same time. So we're going to use this to take these loose also. That one came all the way out. Now, this must be one that a student took it apart. You can see how the threads are kind of raised up here, so when it goes through, all the way through the valve cover, it'll stay in the hole. This one came unthreaded out partly because I used the impact on it. It's threading into the valve cover, which is what it's supposed to do, and then once it drops all the way through, it stays in there. We also have two bolts right here in the middle that need to come out. Now, that one stays in, this one came out. All of these, it's best to put these back in there because they're all unique where they go. This back corner one jumped out on me. I'm going to put it back in there. It doesn't have to be all the way, but since they made it this way, we'll save ourselves a lot of difficulty. Now, today's world, you guys are spoiled by having a camera with you all the time. When I began, you didn't have anything, so you had to write all this down on a piece of paper and take your time and label as much as you could. What you figure out is the masking tape doesn't work. Sharpie markers, which were not available then in my learning days, do not stick to anything that's got oil on it. I'm getting all these started. I've got most of these have jumped out a little bit, so as soon as I move this out, I'm going to have trouble. They're going to lose their location, and then I'm going to be sad. So you guys have the luxury of a camera to take pictures as you go. I highly recommend that to keep you out of trouble. So there. Ordinarily this would be fairly easy to take apart. We'll look at the inside of it another time. I'm just going to set this aside.